In today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 mistakes that new instructional designers make and how to avoid them. These mistakes will hopefully save you a lot of time and stress and help to prevent any sort of burnout that might happen as a result of making these mistakes. I also have them written in my notebook, so if I'm looking down, that's why. So mistake number 1 that new instructional designers make is saying yes to everything. And this could be either coming from people on your team or people outside of your team, across organizations at your company. When people find out that you're an instructional designer, they get really excited that you're going to be creating trainings or you're going to magically help fix this issue that the company's been having by building some sort of training or e-learning material or some sort of job aid or PowerPoint. And you'll find that people will just come to you with a million different asks, being everyone's really struggling with this thing, or, this workflow isn't working. Can we create a training on it? And you might find that it can be overwhelming because everyone wants you to help them. And you probably do want to help them because you probably are excited about your job. But it's very important to not say yes to everything. So let's talk about how you can do that. So the best way to avoid burning out by saying yes to everything is to make sure that you get good at prioritizing. Now, if you're a new instructional designer, you can work with your manager to help you kind of identify what types of projects that you should be prioritizing, whether it's for your own team, if there's projects that your team is working on, or if there's, projects from across the org that seem more important than others. Some projects could have a large business impact, and so you'll want to take those on, versus some projects, certain people might think that they're a really big project because, they're invested and it's their whole world. But if you take a step back and look at things from a bigger scale, from the company perspective, working on a small project for another person might actually not be the best use of your time. So make sure to just practice prioritizing, work with your manager, work with other people on your team to kind of make sure that, the projects you're working on have the biggest impact rather than taking on a million random projects and hoping for the best. And you can always keep track of random one-off asks from people across the company in some sort of project management software. Some people like to use Trello, some people like to use Monday, some people like to use Asana. Some people like to keep a spreadsheet of just, asks from different people and rank them and prioritize them that way, whatever works for you and your team. So mistake number 2 that I see a lot of new instructional designers make is not being super clear with your communication and getting lost in long communication chains, whether that's via email or chat. So if you're a new instructional designer and you're trying to build a training or some sort of course or some sort of job aid or, any sort of materials, and you are looking to learn from maybe the subject matter expert of that product or that workflow, oftentimes I can see different instructional designers starting an email chain, asking a few questions, and just going back and forth a million times to get all their questions answered, rather than coming up with a list of questions all at once and just setting up 10, 15, 20 minutes of a call with that subject matter expert to kind of go through and answer the questions. Some people might say that their company's culture is more email-based and they prefer an email chain, but when it comes to instructional design, you might find a lot of value in getting one-on-one time, face-to-face time with a subject matter expert where you can record the video, come prepared with questions, and just kind of rapid fire, because there are times when maybe they have something they could show you on their screen. They could show you a demo of something. They could show you some mock-ups of something. So rather than getting lost in long email chains, you can always say, hey, are you able to hop on a 20-minute call? I have a prepared list of questions. I can send them to you in advance and we can just go through these. I'll record it so I don't have to, continue to keep asking you. So that's one way you can avoid these long, lengthy email chains or Slack chains or team chains, and just get right to the point, get the stuff you need, and then you can start your work. So mistake number 3 is taking on someone else's lack of preparedness or their urgency as your own problem. There might be times when, there's a new feature or a new product launch or like a new workflow, or, you know, someone needs a training to be made. And maybe training was like the last thing on their checklist that they totally forgot about. And they're like, oh my gosh, you know, hey Sam, you're an instructional designer. I need a training built like yesterday, basically, because we need to launch this new thing to the customers, blah, blah, blah. Now it can be kind of exciting, I guess, as a first-time instructional designer to like take on a project. Maybe you're like, oh yeah, they really need me in the final minute. I could do this. But after a while, after a few, you know, times of, you know, the urgency of someone else and they forgot and you're like, oh, I could save the day, it kind of gets old. So, you know, if that happens, you know, you can always help out and you can create the training, but always, always, always make sure that you set expectations at the end. Like, hey, I'll do this for you one time, but normally it requires, you know, 2, 3, 4 weeks of planning, because otherwise, you know, my stuff isn't prioritized, blah, blah, blah. Another approach is like, you could just straight up tell them like, hey, I have so much other stuff that is prioritized over this, so it's gonna have a few days delay. Hope that's okay, but, you know, in order for things to get done, it takes me like X amount of time to get things done. So, you know, you can either help them and set expectations for next time, or you can just set expectations right away. I think that just depends on your personality, maybe. I'm not saying one is like better than the other. I've done both just at different points in my career. So yeah, just don't mistake other people's urgency for like your own urgency, and make their priorities your priorities, because you should always be looking out for yourself and like the bigger picture of like the company and like the business that you're working for, to make sure that you're working on the right things at the right time. So mistake number 4 that I see a lot of new instructional designers make is being afraid to like ask questions, whether it's to people on your team or across the org. So a few examples of like being too scared to ask for help could even be like, you know, what does this acronym that I keep hearing mean? Or I don't know where this document is, or can I have access to this document? Like some instructional designers, just like new folks, you know, to a team in general, can be scared about these things. But the sooner that you ask these questions and you get this information, the sooner you can just move on and continue with your job. Similarly, I mean, for me personally, I also was, you know, hesitant and nervous to ask questions when I first was getting started. To subject matter experts like product managers or engineers or marketers. Like if I was creating a training about their product, I wouldn't want to like bother them too much. So I would like wait as long as I could to like ask them questions or like clarifying questions about their project, or even like for 20 minutes of their time so I could ask them a million questions. Like I would have the list of questions, but I'd be too nervous to like ask them for their time. When in reality, if I had just, you know, gone for it and asked for their time, I would have been able to finish things a lot quicker. And people are generally a lot nicer than you'd think they are. So like as a new instructional designer working like at a new company, don't be scared. You can always just ping someone or message someone and be like, hey, like I'm new here, like want to introduce myself. Can I put 10, 15, 20 minutes on your calendar? Have like a list of questions about X topic. Would love to meet you and pick your brain. Done. You know, and then just ask for help and they'll be okay. And then you'll get to move on and it gets easier over time. So yeah, just don't be afraid to ask for help. So the 5th mistake that I see new instructional designers making is like doubting their abilities as an instructional designer and a learning expert. And what I mean by that is like, I'll give you an example. So say you're building a training for like a new developer or like a new coder to onboard to your software platform. Now you're meeting with like the expert software engineer at your company and you are trying to build this training and they're giving you like a ton of great information. They're going way above and beyond like what a beginner would need, and they are like talking in like, you know, multiple levels higher of information. And you start to draft out your training and you're like, okay, I'm gonna take from this engineer what information I need for a beginner, because as the instructional designer, I've identified my audience, I know my learning objectives. So I'm gonna build the training, based on that. But then when you go to bring it to like the software engineer, they're like, oh, you're missing so much information. Like this seems really high level. This seems like just for beginners. And then like if you're the new instructional designer, you're like, oh, okay, maybe I'll add more stuff and like make it more complex. But really, you should feel more confident in your abilities as the instructional designer. You're the learning expert. And just like holding that boundary of like, hey, the audience for this specific course is like X, Y, and Z. It's beginners, or it's like someone with 0 to 1 years of experience. So I'll keep the level of information for this type of audience. However, for the next set of courses, we can go for like a more advanced audience. So just making sure that you are holding that boundary, feeling confident in your like expertise as like the learning expert for whatever like product training or like e-learning or whatever content you're building. So those are just 5 mistakes that I've seen new instructional designers make as they're starting their careers. If you've seen or made any of these mistakes or other mistakes, let us know down in the comments below, because I feel like it's a good learning opportunity. So hopefully new instructional designers can avoid these mistakes. And honestly, maybe even like more tenured instructional designers like myself, we can learn from these mistakes as well. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.